All right. So, I'm Genevieve Brazelton. I am the founder of the Bitter Housewife. We make craft cocktail bitters in Portland. I run the business with my husband. He does the sales and operations side of things. I do the product development and then all of the branding and marketing and PR and all that kind of stuff. So, we've been in business I guess technically 12 years now, really out on store shelves for about 10. And we have had some sort of online presence for that whole time. So I am well versed in just getting started and not really sure what you're doing and then trying to figure out how to grow it. We've added product lines and dropped product lines and rebranded multiple times and all that kind of stuff. So, um, lots of varied experience. But today we're going to talk really just about if you've decided that you want to sell online. I mean, this series is kind of focused on the e-commerce aspect, but even if you are just deciding that you need to have some sort of online presence to represent your business, being a realtor, I know that is very much about branding yourself. So there's a lot of this that is very relevant to that. And I do encourage you also to uh, raise your hand with the little icon thingy, or even just interrupt me if you have a question. I would, I don't want to just talk at you, but once I get going, I probably will just keep going. This is one of my favorite topics. So, but don't be afraid to interrupt me because something doesn't make sense or you've got a question. So with that, I will dive right in. Finding my controls. There we go. So, uh, your brand is more than just a logo. I think this is one of the things that I often first encounter with folks is they're like, "Oh yeah, I've got all my branding figured out. I have a business name and I put it in this cool type font and I'm ready to go." But it is so much more than that. Your brand is really everything that people think about when they think about your product, your business, even who you are, if you are essentially branding yourself. So it is worth it to spend a lot of time just really thinking about what it is that you want to put forth. How do you want people to perceive your product and your business? So I always say that starting with your general vibe is a great place. Are you creating something that's fun and playful? Do you do something that's a bit more serious? There's maybe even something, a strong education element to it. People need to know a lot about what you do. Are you selling something that's really high end and you're talking to a luxury market? Or is it really accessibly priced? Or are you doing something that's really niche and kind of geeky, and everybody who's interested in what you're doing has even a totally different vocabulary? Or are you really welcoming to newcomers or even educating them about something brand new? You really just think about what is that general feeling that you want to put forward, because that will get communicated through all the other pieces that we talk about tonight. And I think coming up with a story is also really important. And story can be a lot of different things. It doesn't have to mean you have to tell everybody everything about yourself and why you've created this product. You can always keep a distance, and it can be very much about the product itself and what is important about it and why it exists and why people should have it. However, I do encourage, if you are willing to share anything about you and your connection to what it is that you're selling, the more you are willing to share, the more people feel connected to you and they want to support you and they are loyal customers. So, it can be what first got you started in the business that you're in, or what it is about it that you love, what it is that you do different. How do you stand out from your competition? I know there's a lot of businesses out there that people are bringing a product to the world that is solving a problem that they personally had, or filling a hole that they saw. Um, Andrea, I assume that your illustrations come from a place of it. You love to hike, and you are creating some products that you think are missing in the world, maybe things that you were looking for and couldn't find. They may not be brand new products, but you have a perspective on them, and your design and your illustrations make them totally unique, and they speak to a very specific audience. And I think that's awesome. But then people want to know, well, why? Because they'll want to resonate with you. Why do you pick um, the things that you do draw and illustrate? Why do you pick those versus anything else?
Yeah, that's
There,
exactly it.
there
You
are
nailed it.
all these little bits that, you can start to share. And I think, um, brand stories are also ever evolving. Your story when you're first getting started is very different than after you've been in business for 10 years. I have rewritten our brand story, I don't know how many times. It still starts with that same kernel, but it has grown into something much bigger. So I mentioned it before too, really also communicating how you're different from your competition. And even if you are not, if there is not direct competition, I know I'm in the food space, and oftentimes I encounter folks who are bringing a totally new food product that doesn't exist. But the truth is that you are most likely that product is most likely going to replace something else that person consumes. So you need to kind of think about, what is that? Where does your product fit? What need does it fill? And why you're different from anything else that people would choose to fill that same need. It really comes down to that question of, why you? Why should they give you their money versus anybody else out there? And that might be because you have solved the problem in an entirely different way. Maybe it is just because you have created this really awesome brand that is local, and it is giving back to the community, and there is a larger story that they want to support by buying your products. And maybe it is simply that you have something that is truly unique that they can't find anywhere else. There are lots of ways to spin that, but you ultimately have to figure out how to answer that question. Why you? And who are you selling to? Andrea, I love that you said my target demographic is female hikers, because that is, then you have this very clear picture of who it is you are talking to when you're creating any marketing materials. If you're creating ads, when you're taking pictures to show off your products, even when you're choosing, the fonts for your website and the colors, there's probably maybe a little bit of a natural earthy element to them, because who you're talking to and who you're trying to appeal to. But the target audience also often changes. But it try to, figure out, are you um, selling, again, going back to the general vibe, is this a very high-end product? Does your target audience have a lot of disposable income and they love to just buy new and fun things? Then you just need to convince them that you're the next new fun thing that they need. But if they don't, then and you are hitting a lower price point, more of the everyday person, then you need to figure out how to convince them that your product is right for them, that it is worth spending the money on. But it is more than just knowing that, I sell to women. Who is this woman? Is she in her mid 20s or in her mid 40s? Does she have children or not? Is she part of a larger family? Is she a single woman? Where once you start to really identify who that person is, who is most often your customer, it makes it that much easier to talk to them directly, figure out what they would like, the things that are important to them, and really be able to start to build a connection in all that you put out there. Um, and also figuring out where you fit in your customer's lifestyle. Is this something that they are going to be using every day, multiple times a day, or is it a special occasion item? Does it have a very particular use case so that only certain people need it? All of these things help you to really communicate to that very specific person, making them feel like you understand them and that you have really crafted something that will make them feel, make their lives better, simplify a problem that they have, make their life more fun and interesting. Maybe it's purely entertainment. All of these things are, totally valid and exactly what you need to um, start to communicate through your brand. It all comes together to be your brand. So I'll take a quick pause there and make sure there aren't any questions as I flip through.
I don't have just I was just going to say what you're talking about, and my background's in PR and marketing, and we talk about
Mhm.
that, about personalizing the brand, right, as a connection point with customers. So like the turkeys and the meat, and knowing where you're coming from and knowing the people who raise them, like there's all a lot of personalizing and kind of connection and loyalty, right, that can be built around that.
Yes, totally. I mean, I think that's personalization is another thing, or even just really feeling that local connection, neighborly connection. I do a lot of in-person events, selling the bitters, and it is amazing how many people, just assume the person behind the table is just a hired employee, nobody, and then they recognize that the postcard on the table has my face on it, and they're like, "Oh, wait, that's you. You make these?" And then they want to know all about it. Before it was just like, "Oh, that's an interesting product," but now that there's that person there, they want to know, why do I make this? Where do you make it? How long have you been doing this? All of those questions start to come out. So, your website is really, you want to put it together in such a way that it does the best job it possibly can to feel like you've had that personal connection. It is much easier said than done, trust me. But if you look at it that way of This is this is in place of me meeting someone at an event or having them come into my shop. How can I create a website that feels as close to that experience as I possibly can get? And yes, it is a huge gap, but if you go into it thinking that way, I think you will do a pretty good job. So, getting more into the the actual, well, what do you need as you're putting your website together, whether you're selling or not. I think most of these things are applicable, whether you're selling online or not. So you do need some sort of logo, some sort of, a name that is stylized, even if it's just stylized font, but maybe you have a little picture with it or an illustration, or some kind of even geometric shapes that go with it that make it identifiable. And I do encourage you, if at all possible, to maybe get versions that are slightly different. Um, and I'm going to see if I can do this easily, but I don't think I can. Uh, oh no, I closed it. Never mind. I was going to show you a couple different versions of my logo, but like you can see on these slides, I have this little diamond shape down in the bottom. But then if you go to our website, we have a long horizontal version of the logo because it fits better in that scenario. This nice little diamond is great to put in footers and headers when you just kind of want to mark something as yours, but sometimes you really need something bigger that is easier to read. And you may even have something that is just a couple of initials, as opposed to the whole the whole logo. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. So I do encourage you, if you're working with a designer, to talk to them about maybe a couple different versions that have some different use cases, something that's small, something that's horizontal, maybe you want vertical, maybe you even want that little kind of bug that you can put places. And along with that often goes a color palette, but it goes beyond your logo, and that you're going to use this color palette on your website, on postcards, various, different, it just gives you the colors that you will always be pulling from for a consistency of presence. Um, as Paul pointed out when I first pulled up my slideshow, that red, that is our Bitter Housewife red. It is on everything that we do. We have 8 different flavors of bitters, and each bitters has their own color that kind of signifies that flavor. But those colors are only ever used when we are talking about that flavor. If I'm making a postcard that highlights our grapefruit bitters, I use this pinkish color that we use for the grapefruit. But I will also use that same red. So having a color palette that you pull from, whether it's, very specific to products, or it is just 2 or 3 colors that are always present in any kind of graphics that you do. Fonts are another thing. Having consistent looking text is also a way to help people recognize your brand, keep things looking consistent. You do not have to buy fonts. You can pick fonts that are readily available for free and use them. There is no issue with that. But if you want something very distinct, you can also find some really reasonably priced fonts out there, $50. You pay for a license and you use it for the rest of your life. And that may give you something that's a little bit more distinct, that allows you, especially if you're doing logos that maybe, that Coca-Cola font, everybody knows that logo, even though it is just a script. So thinking about things like that. Um, and then if you are selling products online, you need pictures. You need lots of pictures, honestly, of everything. But the first place to start is what folks will call just your straight up product photography. It's the things that you see, the product on an all white background. And these are things that you can do yourself, or you can hire. There's a lot of services. There's even local folks who do product photography for pretty reasonable prices. And it's if you are not changing your products all the time, you can use the same photos for years and years. So it is a worthwhile investment if it's not something you feel you can do yourself. But there are also a lot of tools out there to help you do them yourself. Really, you just these days, you need a pretty plain background um, that you can take a picture of your product against. And there are a lot of photo editing software. I am a big fan of all of the Adobe products. I use Photoshop all the time, but I know that it is cost prohibitive to some folks because, it's a either few $100s up front or a monthly subscription to it. But you can do a lot of stuff with it, and you can pull out backgrounds with just a couple clicks with AI these days. The remove background tool is lovely. It used to take me hours to do it. And now it's about 5 minutes. Um, but you can also, there are a lot of services too that you can pay. You can take really just as long as they're fairly well lit and against a plain light colored background, you can send photos off to a lot of services online that they'll do that photo editing for you. And remove the background and give you both on a plain white background and even on a transparent background. So you can layer your products, put them into different situations. So if you invest in no other photography, product photography is the first thing to think about. And then there is lifestyle photography, which by that I mean putting your, oops, I did not mean to skip forward there. Putting your product in a setting that is natural to it. Yes, Jamie also mentioned Canva. Canva is a great resource that is also pretty reasonably priced. I heard that they're doing a major price increase in the near future, but I can't really speak to that. So currently, they're a great cheap option. And they're also really set up for folks who are just beginning to play around with graphic design and editing photos. So they're really user friendly. But lifestyle photography is kind of the next thing to think about. It really does help build out your website, but it also is the things that you will use in other marketing materials, all of which we'll get into in our last session. But if you're doing postcards, if you're doing social media, all of these are lifestyle images that you want to create. So think about, you don't even have to get models, but maybe it is that you show people wearing your products if it's that.
No, did I get
What was
my
that? I think we're hearing a background conversation. So put your product in the type of setting that it will often be in. So Jamie, if you do have products that you can sell online, I know frozen is not the easiest. But maybe you're actually taking more photographs of the farm. the chickens and the pigs running around, the people that are there, working the farm, just to give people a sense of more of who they are supporting, and make it a little bit easier for them to imagine, what's going on or the products that you do sell. But if you have products that you are selling online, put them in a kitchen. If it's things that are being cooked, show the finished recipes on a plate. All of these types of things are um, just help people really imagine, and them bringing the product into their life, or even how they would use it. That's another thing. If you do make something that is maybe they're not quite sure about. I mean, from in my case, bitters, okay, people might be kind of familiar, but they're not quite sure. So I put the bitters, next to the cocktails, or on a bar top, or my hand dashing it into the mixing glass. All of these kinds of things just make the product seem more real, and for folks to be able to imagine that thing in their life. And then there's basic graphic elements. These are not anything that you have to have, but definitely something to consider especially if you are hiring a designer to kind of help you with some elements. That diamond that we use as both our label shape, but also that highlights our name, that little bug down in the bottom of the slide. We also just use that diamond shape all the time in marketing materials, just to provide a little visual interest. Sometimes I blow it up really big and you just see one point of it. Sometimes I use the whole diamond and I lay a couple more on top of it. Sometimes I make them really teeny and I kind of sprinkle them around and they look a little like sparkles. It just gives you something to make things a little bit more visually interesting, and really mark it as yours. We also have these hash marks that we use, but there's little things, and it can just be as simple as maybe it is a circle and you use it in a variety of ways. You use the whole circle, you use a few circles layered on top of each other at different places. You blow it up really big and you just use part of the curve, but it's always that same curve. These little things can just add a lot of visual interest both to your website and any other marketing materials. And then the last asset that you need, if you are going to be selling online, is all of that text. And it is probably the most overwhelming part for most people. I recommend that you start with product descriptions, and really describe your products as though you are talking to someone who has no idea what it is that you are selling. Fit as much information into the description as possible. Um, how big is it? How heavy is it? Where do you use it? How often do you use it? Why would you use it, or different ways to use it? All of, as much information as you really can pack into a product description. If you are building your website on most e-commerce platforms, you can, go for paragraphs and paragraphs. I don't recommend that you write books about your products, but a couple paragraphs is okay. But you want to start with the most important information. What are the first questions they're going to ask? Colors or flavors or size, depending on what it is that you're selling. And then keep layering in those details that really allow them, that basically answer all of the questions that somebody might ask about your product. But then you also need that additional website copy. Sometimes it is a few well-written sentences that are placed on different pages. Other times you are really explaining, you're writing your whole about story. You are telling people how and why your products are different. You have to decide how much text is really needed. And it really depends on whether you are doing a super simple, one page website with then a little shop attached to it, or do you have multiple products and product lines and you really need to build it out? I think most people here are starting with the fairly simple, so think about a little welcoming text as people first land on your website. What what is it that you want to say to them to let them know that they're in the right place and let them know what it is that you do? Um, Give a general introduction to your products, and then you can have your products right there with your descriptions. And maybe then you just have a little, a couple paragraphs that you are about you and the business. But as you grow, keep adding to that story. Listen to the questions that people are asking. Maybe you do need to have a frequently asked questions page to answer all of these questions. Maybe you decide that you need blogs to really talk to people more about what it is that you do. Um, this all feeds more into the marketing aspect of things, which we'll get to in the last session also. We'll talk about SEO and blog posts and really how to optimize websites. But as you start to build that text, really think about what it is that folks most need to know. Pause for a quick second. Is anybody have questions on all the digital assets that you might possibly need? So then another big part of selling online is your pricing. And there is a lot more to this than I think we could do a whole seminar on just figuring out your pricing. So I admit this is a pretty high level overview of it all, but it should give you some things to start to think about. Um, and I believe that the SBA can actually do quite a bit to help you with that. Jason, is that correct? You can jump in and help people with cost of goods and margins and that kind of stuff when they really dive into it. But what you want to think about first is, where do you fit um, in the sliding scale of possible price points? And this is more important if you are in a space where there's a lot of competitors. Then there's very different ways that you can enter the market. Are you trying to be the cheapest option so that you hopefully sell the most? Are you a really high-end version of something that is maybe a little bit more mid-priced, but there's a reason that yours is this luxury version of it? Or are you trying to be right in the middle? Not too high, not too low. That's, where most people kind of decide they want to fall. They want to fall with the majority of the competitive pricing. But then you really have to do a lot of work to differentiate yourself from who you're going to be compared to. If there is not a lot of competition, then you really kind of do get to decide what the market will bear. You know, you're going to be one of the first ones out there. So then you have to think more about cost of goods and margins. You need to, how much does it cost you to make this thing? Both your materials and your time. You always need to pay yourself, even if you aren't technically paying yourself, but work in, you know, how many minutes or hours or days it takes you to make this thing, and what should you be getting paid, you know, even if you're only considering it minimum wage. Figure out what the labor would be if you were to pay somebody else to do it. Um, and then your margins are, how many times do you kind of mark that up? Part of your cost of goods is also your overhead, rent that you're paying. There's all of these things, which is why I say that it can get super complicated and we don't really have all of the time. But if you start to think about, what does it cost you to make this thing exist? And then how much do you need to mark it up? And that may be, and that markup is very different depending on what your goals are for the business and how you plan to sell it. If you are always selling it direct and you're never going to go into wholesale distribution, anything like that, then that margin becomes, how much do you need to make a good living for yourself, or to make this business be worth it? So maybe you only double your cost of goods, and that feels comfortable for you. And that gives you a little bit of room to put things on sale sometimes. If things get broken, you have to replace them, or people want refunds, you know, you've got this little buffer, so that you can continue to, you know, sell at that price. But maybe you know you're going to go into wholesale. So then you need to do some research about your specific industry, and what are the general margins that any sort of distributor is going to need. Like in our case, we sell to a couple specialty food distributors that then sell directly to the grocery stores. So the distributors need to make a little bit of money, and then the grocery stores need to make money. And you got to do the math to figure out what ideally is the price that you would like your product to land on the shelf. So we want our products, our bitters, most of our flavors to land on the shelf at about $17. The grocery stores want to mark it up. They want to make 40% on top, you know, what they pay for it. They want to charge an additional 40%. But then our distributors, what they charge, they want to make an additional 30%. And then we also need to make some money in there too. So it is a huge, complicated math problem. But it is worth doing the research to figure out, you know, what those margins are in the places that you want to sell, what the industry will bear, what's kind of the normal practice, and really, honestly, give some hard thought to what it is you want to make from this business. Because that is ultimately your starting point of, how many things do you need to sell and how much do you need to make each time you sell one of those, for it to be worth it for you to do it. Other things to consider as you're kind of figuring out those costs, but also where you want to fit in the market, is there any special licensing that you need to sell your product? Because that can be, you know, kind of factored in as one of your overhead costs. Something sorry, something that, a regular expense that you have to keep the business alive. Or maybe you personally have some special training or licensing that makes what you do even more valuable. Charge for that by all means. Or do you have connections or partnerships that allow you to offer something different, or more specialized that also allows you to charge a little bit more? You do want to consider your overhead costs. That's your rent of any place that you are working out of. If you have shipping costs, either to get your ingredients to you or to send all of your products out. Do you need to pay somebody to send all of your products out? Um, if you do end up having employees, do you pay them health insurance? Do you pay for that? All of these things start to get factored into your overhead costs. It will continue to grow as you grow your business, but always be aware of making sure everything is covered. And then customization is also something else that may allow you to charge more. Andrea, I don't know if you do commissioned pieces, or maybe there are some things that you allow people to customize in some way. That is definitely something you can charge a premium for. And also makes those things seem more special too. So people want them more. But when you hang your shingle, um, having given considered thought to what your prices are, sets you up to then grow your business in a comfortable way, so you're not constantly changing your price or upping your price. So, um, Paul, yes, I see your hand.
Uh, so you are rightly pointing out all of the considerations that go into setting your price point. And that it's a lot to think about, and it's almost as much a part of your brand identity as anything when you look at how you distinguish yourself from your competition and all this.
Totally. Yeah.
So my
Are you
question
the
to
cheap
you is,
option? Are you the luxury option?
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So, how do you handle discounting? Do you have sales? Do you have specials? How do you with your company
Mhm.
handle discounting in a way that does not devalue your product?
Um, Great question. Yes, because I think there you will often see online brands that seem to always be having a sale. So then you wonder, why should I ever pay full price for this thing? Um, we do online on our website. We generally only offer sales in the holidays, to really encourage folks to buy gifts for other people, as well as themselves. And otherwise, we may throughout the year have one or two very specialized sales, maybe either on a flavor that is very seasonally specific, or sometimes we do little limited edition things that we offer at a cheaper price. But we very rarely do sales ourselves. However, we are distributed and sold in grocery stores. Grocery stores like to do sales all the time. So we offer them the ability to discount our product once every quarter. And we keep it pretty consistent, but we have done the math to work that into our pricing so that we have this little wiggle room, this buffer to know at a minimum, we're going to make this. And if we're not selling, if we're not on sale, then we make this. And we ultimately kind of average everything. And what often surprises people is that, so our cheapest price point, and I'll break this down with some numbers, but I don't want you, don't get too caught in it. So our suggested retail is $17. Our cheapest price point is to sell to distribution, which honestly, each of our distributors has a slightly different price because of their margins that they want to hit. But roughly, we sell them a bottle of bitters at around $6 to $7. Then they mark it up and they sell it to the grocery stores, usually around like $9 or $10. But included in that price is all of the logistics of getting the product to the grocery store. So that's kind of a shipping included price. We sell also to small retailers direct. They buy wholesale from us, and we sell between $9 and $11, but they pay for the shipping. But then we have built into all of that kind of the buffer of being able to do a couple discounts a year. And then we do sell on our website directly at $17 a bottle. And you think, oh, that's where you make most of the money. But we are often covering at least half of the shipping cost for people. We have to pay for the packaging to get it to them, the boxes and the craft paper and the tape and all of that. Sometimes bottles break and we have to send them a new one. Sometimes porch pirates come and it never makes it to them, so we have to send them another order. So ultimately, when we average it all out, it does not matter how we sell it. Every bottle we sell, we figure we sell it at about $7 a bottle. And it, no matter, we have done it for the last 10 years. We review our pricing and our costs, at least once a year, if not more frequently, and it always ends up the same. That it's really, we average about the same no matter how we sell it, based on the labor involved, the time involved, and the extra things involved. So that is always something to kind of stash in the back of your head, that while selling direct is awesome, and it can be the most lucrative, if you do start to sell in other channels and you need to go into distribution, what often seems like a shockingly low price to sell your product at ends up being kind of your average, because it's a whole lot easier to send out a pallet of 40 cases of something than it is to send out a box of one. So anyway, pricing.
Yep.
And like I said, we could talk about that forever. So I am gonna do a little quick, wrap up, and then please, this is the time for questions. Throw anything at me. But I think, ultimately what I would love to convey is that your website should really just tell your story, how you're different, and really try to speak directly to that person who is your ideal customer. You want to pull together the best possible photos and graphics and text that you can to have them all work together to tell your story. And as Paul pointed out, your pricing is part of your story. It really is, even though it seems so far removed.